our own planet is only a tiny part of the vast cosmic tapestry, a starry fabric of worlds yet untold.
Nothing captures the human imagination quite like the galaxies that sparkle above us. Maybe that's why watercolor galaxy paintings have become a really popular art project. And in addition to looking cool, they're a great way to learn basic watercolor skills. So let's get started with step 1 of this project. What we're going for in this first layer is a tie-dyed look with the watercolor, with some variation in color, some light areas and some dark areas, all bleeding together a bit, but not bleeding so much that it all turns into one big puddle.
I'm getting y'all's painting assignment ready for tomorrow.
The first step is to tape the paper down and create a border around the edges. Avoid any distractions while you do this.
Oh, are you making a video? Hey guys!
Once the paper is taped down, we're going to start with a watercolor method called wet on wet. This is where you start by wetting the paper with just regular water before you paint on top of it. Do this quickly and softly with a nice, thin, even coat of water. Most watercolor paints, and the paints we're using, come in dry little pucks. So you have to dip your brush in water, put just a little bit of water on that puck, and stir it around to wake that watercolor up. You don't need to stir too much or try to dissolve the entire puck. You just want to wake up the surface of it. You can also take paint from your puck and put it onto a styrofoam plate and add more water to it to lighten it up. We want the center of the galaxy to be pretty light, so diluting the paint even more with water can help us get that light look. And I'm just kind of dabbing on different colors, creating a colorful little cloud that will become the center of the galaxy. And you can see how with that wet on wet technique, the colors are bleeding together and creating this cool kind of galaxy nebula shape. If your paper starts to ripple and create puddles of water in the middle, then tip your board up and let the excess water drain to other parts of the painting. Moving out from the center, I'm going to add in some darker colors and also allow the paint to go on a little bit thicker so that the edges of the galaxy can be a little bit darker. And you want to have different patches of color. You want to have different cloudy shapes. Don't use so much water that everything blends together completely, but you should have enough water so that the edges of each shape and each color bleed together a bit. Cover the entire paper, and then you can go back into some of the lighter spots and drop in little bits of color and let them bleed in and create slightly brighter, more dramatic areas. And then the first step's pretty much done. But there's one final trick we can use, and that's to sprinkle salt on the painting. When you get a little bit of salt and sprinkle it onto the painting, and then as the painting dries, what happens is the granules of salt will pull the water and pigment in towards the little salt granule. And as it dries, it will create this kind of starburst effect that will add to the texture and beauty of your galaxy. Now keep in mind, this is just the first step to this project. We're going to layer some stars on top of this. We're going to do some silhouetted shapes and trees towards the bottom, so we've still got some work to do. But I also wanted to show you some alternative types of shapes and looks you can get in your sky, so here's a few more quick examples. This was actually the first one that I painted, and I went with a more simple color palette of just blue and purple, and then created some darker areas around the edge. I did use the salt trick on this one too. In this painting, I did a curving aurora borealis shape in the middle. Started with some light greens, faded in some yellows. And then around the outer edges of that, I went in with some dark bluish purple. Also used a paper towel several times during this painting to kind of wipe off some of the extra paint to lighten it up or get rid of some puddles. In this painting, I started with a supernova kind of nebula shape using light reds and oranges, and then brought that in with some really dark purple around the edges, and then went even darker around the border with some black watercolor. In this final painting, I started by tracing the container of salt, and that's going to be the moon. And then I did the wet on wet method everywhere but inside that circle. That way the bleeding of the sky does not fade into the moon. And then I created some yellow clouds, darkened that up by fading in some black, even darkened up the clouds. Then I put a little puddle of water in the middle of the moon and hit it with some yellow and some black, dabbed it with a paper towel, hit it with some salt, and we've got a moon up there floating in the galaxy. Alright, so use those examples and techniques and create your own galaxy watercolor painting. Let's go.